What's going on? You're in the Beat Sessions. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary, and welcome into the Grapevine Report for the week of September 9th. Since the segment is still pretty new, give you a rundown on what's going on. The three of us decided that once a week, we want to bring you something fun, something that's music related and relatively obscure. Our hope with this segment is that we get to highlight something once a week that's brand new to all of you. And if you happen to be familiar with that week's topic, hopefully you can throw some energy and enthusiasm behind that and highlight some information that, maybe the three of us weren't able to contribute. We really hope that as this segment continues to progress and develop, that you all enjoy it. But the idea is to keep it open-ended. We want to talk about film, literature, different albums, artists, themes. Any and all things are fair game for this segment. And so for my first leadoff segment, got to talk about one of my favorite bands of all time, a band that I talked about almost a year to the date when they released their new record, No Way Out But Through. Want to talk about Face to Face. Absolutely love these guys. Formed in Victorville, California back in 1991 and fronted by Trevor Keith for all of those years. He's on my right in that top photo. Longtime rhythm guitar player Chad Yarrow is on my left, and that's outside of Club Congress circa 2012, 2013, I think. It's that one's a little fuzzy, but I know the bottom one, that's outside the Observatory back in 2019. That gentleman that you don't recognize is my oldest childhood friend, Aaron. It's a hell of a trip that we had going out there to see. I got the new lineup there with Trevor, Scott Shifflett, longtime bass player, and then you have Danny Thompson and Dennis Hill. But that show was really cool. Lagwagon played with Face to Face. I'd never been to the Observatory. Very cool venue. And to see Lagwagon, the first band that Aaron and I ever saw together, they played with Bouncing Souls at the Nile when we were like 14 years of age. It's a pretty cool memory. And then to see one of our favorite punk bands, probably our favorite punk band of all time, first time we ever saw them was together. So it was kind of this excellent full circle moment, being able to, do a meet and greet and shake these guys' hand for probably like the third time now. I always enjoy saying what's up to Trevor. He's an amazing dude, an incredible songwriter, one of my favorite songwriters over the course of my life. I love how he's got this punk prophet essence about him. He reminds me of Mike Ness a lot in that regard, but the man writes lyrics that are just really honest, and more often than not they can be a little brutal, but it's that cold hard truth, that honesty as far as how brutal the world is. But also what I love about Trevor's lyrics is that no matter how he's approaching a song, no matter what the mood of that particular track is, there's always the idea that accountability is the name of the game. And at the end of the day, your successes, your failures, all these things that happen in your life, more often than not, are on you and the decisions that you make, the people that you choose to surround yourself with, etc., etc., etc. So there's been a lot of moments in my life where I've, faced a challenge or faced a tough decision, faced something that I knew was going to be pretty significant as far as the outcome of that decision. And more often than not, I find myself listening to Face and listening to Trevor. So love the man for that reason. These guys dropped their debut record in 1992, Don't Turn Away. It's an excellent album, very well received. So it was re-released a year later on Fat Records. And I love that label. I love that album was able to get that re-release and to get that exposure. I don't think being released on Doctor Strange would have helped it out, the album out the way that it did. As far as I'm concerned, in my experience, there was a ton of people that were familiar with Fat Records at the time when we first started listening to these guys. So I love that record. It's the red cover there. You've Done Nothing, I Want, great songs. Disconnected, probably the highlight track on that album. And when they went on to make their next record, that second album, Big Choice, is the one with the blue sky and the yellow fields there. It's I love that album cover. It's an amazing image. And that's the album where Chad Yarrow joined the band. So they became a four-piece after starting off a three-piece. So you have Rob Kurth on drums, Matt Riddle on bass, Trevor Keith filling out that original lineup. You add Chad Yarrow for that second record. An amazing album as well. A-OK, You Lied. And actually, when they jumped up and re-released that on A&M, the band re-recorded Disconnected, which I love that they joke about the whole sellout thing on the album and then go right into the song. It's a pretty funny moment, but you can't necessarily blame these guys for for connecting with their fans and wanting that, especially back in that day and age. There weren't all these social media tools. So if you were relying on exposure, you basically had this option back in 1995. So I've never hated on the band for them. There's some people that call them sellouts. I will never say that about this band. They've never sold out their style, not once. There's not a single record where I've ever felt that. Their third record, that self-titled album, the man looking at himself in the mirror, probably my favorite record of what I refer to as the big three. These three records, most of your face-to-face fans, if they're talking to a new fan, are probably going to recommend these three albums to get into the band. But that self-titled record, I Won't Lie Down, Blind, Ordinary, Complicated, there's so many excellent songs on that record. And I really like the addition of Scott Shifflett on bass for that album. Matt Riddle came into conflict with Trevor Keith, left the band after Big Choice. And it's this interesting moment. I feel like it kind of reminds me of Tool as far as Paul DeMore, and you look at his bass work and the style that he established, but Justin Chancellor coming in, picking up, and really making it better. And I've kind of always felt that way about Scott Shifflett. As much as I really enjoy Matt Riddle and his bass playing and his technique, I think Scott stepped in and filled out that role so much better. And just the energy that him and Trevor Keith share from the songwriting process, I think is outstanding too. So I really dig that Scott's been there pretty much every step of the way for the most part after those first two records. And Shifflett, if that name sounds familiar, it's because he's the brother of Chris Shifflett, who is the guitarist for Foo Fighters, who was formerly the guitarist for No Use for a Name, which is the band that Matt Riddle left Face to Face to join, if you caught all that. But these first three records really establishing this band and their reputation as being melodic, as being insightful, and just being all around awesome punk rockers. I really enjoy these first three records, but I gotta say, it was this live record, Face to Face Live, recorded in the fall of 1997, released in early 1998. And this was the first time that I ever heard this band. And it's a very special moment. I remember being on that bus, being on a trip for athletics, and my buddy Sky was like, dude, you gotta listen to this band if you're not familiar with them. This was right around the time started getting into punk rock, and so threw this record on, and the production's amazing on this live record. I absolutely love the energy that it captures from the performances. There's two different performances that they're taking audio from on this, but it also acts as basically kind of like a best of for those first three records, so highlighting pretty much the best tracks from those three records. I loved the exposure and the experience. I remember that bus ride so vividly. One of my favorite moments in life, because I discovered this band and was able to hear them for the first time. And thank you to my buddy Sky for doing so. Thanks for getting me involved in cross country too. Sky, I owe Sky quite a bit. There's quite a bit that dude got me into that I appreciate over the years. But this live record is outstanding. And I might also argue that for a new fan, this could be a great starting point. No matter when you pick this record up, though, you're going to enjoy the hell out of it. It's just an incredible experience. In 1999, the band moves on from drummer Rob Kurth, and that live album is the last time we see him featured. They pick up drummer Pete Parada, who's known for his work with The Offspring, and recently with Tim Pool. I think that's Tim Pool. You lucked out, dude. You were able to pull Pete Parada to drum on that new single that you got out. That is absolutely amazing. But a year later, the band releases Ignorance is Bliss. This is off I'm drawing a Beyond is the name of the label, UK label that is no longer around. But this was a big turning point for the band. And I've always really been into alternative music, all different kinds. So I enjoyed this album when it first dropped. But all of my friends that were really just into the punk scene felt so betrayed. They were like, what the hell is going on? This is an interesting record for all of the introspection that Trevor Keith dabbles in lyrically. This record took that to an immensely dark place, more than any other songs or any other run of songs on an album may have. This whole record pretty dark for the most part. And as far as the music, it has more of an alternative style. There's definitely a slower tempo to a lot of these songs. You're not getting that fast pace in, just right up in their punk feel on this album. And so it's really interesting as you read about the history of this record, and as time has gone on, more people certainly have grown to appreciate it. I've learned to appreciate it even more as I've grown up. I think that lyrically, Trevor Keith is in an amazing spot on this record, whether you dig that dark perception or not. I'm just enjoying just his writing on this record is absolutely fantastic. And it's just a different, fun change of pace for this band. Those first three records, they, for all the strengths and for all the wonderful music that's there, you get a run of songs that are generally doing all the same things. So I really enjoyed the fact that for their fourth studio record, they came out swinging with something completely different, with a relatively new lineup. You got Scott there and Pete Parada on drums for the first time working together in the studio. So I think this is an exceptional record. I don't think a brand new Face-to-Face fan should start with this album, but I certainly would encourage you over time to maybe check it out. And who knows, you could end up just absolutely loving this thing. They move on, and that same year they released Standards and Practices, a great cover record. There's some outstanding songs on that album. My favorite is their cover of Don't Change by INXS, and I'm really a big fan of What Difference Does It Make. I really don't care for the Smiths too much, but where they take that song and what Trevor Keith does vocally versus Morrissey on that track, I love the way they pick up the tempo and the vocal at the end. He slays Morrissey in every respect on that song. I really dig the collection of covers though. And for those people that felt jaded by Ignorance is Bliss, it was a quick way to get back to what felt like a Face-to-Face record, even if it was an album of covers. Below it is Reactionary, and I love this record. A really fun project, and maybe a slight bit of acquiescence after Ignorance is Bliss, but they get back to basics, get back to their style, and create a record that, they wrote a bunch of songs and then ultimately let the fans choose what songs they wanted to include. I think they wrote like 16 or 18 songs, ultimately put 12 on the record. But some of my favorites on that, Disappointed, Hollow, really loved that album, and just the way it kind of brought things back to pace. As much as I love Ignorance is Bliss, was really happy to see more of that punk rock aesthetic on Reactionary, but still kind of a dark record too. And then for How to Ruin Everything, they go back to being a three-piece. Chad Yarrow leaves the band to focus on his family. They released that record and take a hiatus after that for roughly about 10 years. How to Ruin Everything came out in 2002, and the band would go on to take a break for about 9 years roughly. Trevor Keith and Scott working on different projects, working on one together as well in that course of time. But I love that ultimately they chose to get back together. I included all these three records together because this was their Vagrant run. These three records all out on Vagrant. And then they make a comeback. They choose to reunite. And Trevor Keith at this time has Antagonist Records. So Laugh Now, Laugh Now, Laugh Later. Laugh Now, Laugh Later, having a hard time getting that one out. Released on Antagonist. And then 3 Chords and a Half Truth, released a few years after that, I believe 2011, 2014 respectively. And I dig the energy. Laugh Now, Laugh Later might be one of the more heavier records that they put out. And 3 Chords and a Half Truth has this fun sort of a kind of like rockabilly, kind of like country punk rock aesthetic to it. And it really reminds me a lot of what Social Distortion has done throughout their career, getting even more of that feel of Mike Ness. For Protection, they released that in 2016. Go back to Fat Records. I love that they did that. And for No Way Out But Through, actually back with Fat Records on that album as well. So really digging this current stretch. This lineup is a lot of fun. Having had a chance to meet Dennis Hill and Danny Thompson, they have some big big shoes to fill. Some players that have been in this band over the years that have been a lot of fun to listen to. But I really enjoyed checking out those guys at the Observatory a few years back. It's been almost 3 years back now. An excellent show, and I'm glad that these guys are still together making music, and very much looking forward to their new record when they put that out. Haven't heard anything, not really sure, but I imagine that they're not done yet. So I hope that you guys have a chance to check out Face-to-Face this week. I hope that you find this segment helpful and entertaining. And this is a band that's meant a lot to me over the years. I have some great memories listening to them for a number of reasons, and I think if you dive into them and give them a chance, that you'll end up sharing a lot of those same experiences. So please enjoy the rest of your week. Please stay tuned to the channel for more album reviews throughout the course of the week, and we will see you next time on the Beat Sessions.